What we're talking about here is fitting out. When you're talking to a seller, and let's say they have very little equity, and let's just use an example. They need to sell. They've tried to sell. It's an expired listing. It's a $150,000 house. They bought at the top of the market. They owe $145,000. They tried to sell with an agent. It didn't work out. They couldn't get their price. So now we have an expired listing, and we're talking to them. We've already done the 5 steps of the negotiation, but we've kind of skipped the money step because there's no equity in it, right? And then we're jumping into the 3 column. Could you hold that up again, Robby? That 3 column? And what I would do is I would change the rent to own to sell on terms. You see that 3rd column? I wouldn't say rent to own. I would say sell on terms. Okay? And then I would explain that, as we went over the cost to sell, you probably don't understand this. The cost to sell, an agent isn't going to describe to you what they are. So let's just review them. What do you think they are? And then try to get that out of them. I would try to say, what's the biggest one? And the biggest one is a sales commission. So I'd put 6%. So why don't you write 6% in that column while we're talking? 6% agent. That's all I'd write. Then we're going to talk about the next most common cost to sell. What do you think that is? And then try to get them to say closing costs. You want to lead them into what the closing costs are. Okay. And sometimes it's split. Sometimes the seller pays for it. Very few times the closing costs are paid just by the buyer. So closing costs 2% is what I would write. Now the third one is very, very hard for them to figure out, and they don't know what it is, and it's seller's concessions. Now, and basically how I raise the issue is there's a big piece of the puzzle where you lose some equity if you sell with an agent, and it's called seller's concessions. Have you heard of that? And then I'd pull out an FHA letter or web page that talks about seller's concessions and the maximum seller's concessions that's available when you do an FHA loan. So what you could do is you could lose anywhere from 3 to 6% of the value of the house, and I would put 3-6% seller's concessions FHA. And this is where you can lose a big chunk of the puzzle if you sell with an agent, because most of the agents are getting their cash buyers through FHA. They're not conventional loan. I'd say 90% of them. So you almost have to figure that into the piece of the puzzle. And lastly is the time to sell. The time to sell is 3 to 4 months, even if you price the property right with an agent. And generally, your house is vacant. Now, who's paying the mortgage and the insurance and the taxes while it's vacant?
The owner.
So do we have to figure that in as a cost to sell, right?
Sure, yeah.
So let's figure in 3 months times, what is your PITI payment?
And they say, what, $1,000 or whatever? Whatever
it is, So PITI is probably with taxes and insurance like $1,200, whatever that is. You got a mortgage payment, you got a tax payment that month, you got an insurance payment that month. So it's $1,200 times 3, that's another $3,600. So just as an exercise, let's take 6% of the value of the house. If your number is $150,000, if that's what you think it's worth, and we've already been through the comps, that's what I think it's worth. It'll appraise for $150,000. Well, 1% of that's $1,500. 6 times $1,500, what's that number? And then punch it in. You got a calculator handy?
Yep. 9,000.
All right, so put 9,000, the 6% for the agent. What's 2%? That's 1,500 and 1,500. That's an easy one. That's 3,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you had 6% seller's concessions, that's the same as the agent's commission, so we know what that number is because we've already figured that one out. That's 9,000 again, right?
Yep.
And then what's the last one? Was the holding cost? Remember the 3 months times 1,200. That's 3,600. So can you add these numbers up for me? Can you give me a handle on that?
24,600.
Did you say 24,600?
Yeah.
So basically it's 25 grand, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's just say that is a positive choice. It's not a negative one because you've sold the house, but you've had to take a hit to get rid of the house. And that's if you got your price.
Right.
But if you didn't get your price, you would get less, right? Let's say it sold for 145,000. You listed it for 150, but you got 145, and you still had to pay these costs to sell.
Yeah.
So it might even be 30,000. In a perfect world, it's probably going to be about 25,000 to get rid of the house. Okay? If you sold with an agent. Let's move on to renting it out to an unproven tenant, to a tenant that you don't know what's going to happen. Let's say market rent for your beautiful house is $1,000, but you have to pay $1,200. You have a negative cash flow of $200. And let's say there's maintenance, and let's say there's repairs, and you have to factor that in. And then you also have to figure out whether or not they're going to move out, and then you have to clean it up and re-rent it again. Or if you have to pay a property manager. Property managers are generally 10% of collected rent. So you don't collect the whole $1,000. If market rent's $1,000, you're going to have to pay them a monthly fee to rent that out. So that's generally your income coming in is around $900 plus maintenance. So that's a choice, right? You can rent it out. But one of the problems with landlords, is getting a call at 2 a.m. about a toilet. Oh, my toilet's busted up. My kid put something in the toilet. And then what are you going to do? Get out of your bed and go fix that thing? Or if the rent's late. So, these people generally look at you as the rich landlord anyway, right? It's adversarial. It's not a cooperative type of thing. And their attitude is, well, you got to fix it. It's broken. I'm just paying you rent. You're the landlord. Or the rent will be in soon. The car broke down. Whatever.
Right.
And now you got to make your mortgage payment. So an unproven tenant could be a headache. It might be perfect in a perfect world. Who knows? But it is a positive choice. So we're putting it down as a second choice. The third choice is selling it on terms. Now, you probably don't know anything about it, and your agent probably didn't talk to you about it either. But why do you think that's true? That you don't know anything about it, and your agent hasn't brought it up?
It takes money out of their pocket.
How? How does that happen with the agent?
If they're not involved, they probably won't get their commission.
When you do a rental lease option, where they lease for a while and then they buy it down the road, they don't get their commission up front, do they?
Right.
So they work for free. They don't want to do that. They don't want to pay money to go help you sell it on rent to own, because they don't make any money. Same thing with a land contract. They don't make any money. And they generally feel that sellers aren't comfortable paying their commission out of their pocket, so they're not going to bring it up. The only way they want to bring it up is if they bring a cash buyer through your house, and they don't care if you lose equity. Look at all the equity you're losing on this first column.
Right.
How many? They would be shooting themselves in their foot if they told you about the real cost to sell. That's why whenever you go to a closing, the seller's going, oh my God, where all those costs come from? Well, if the agent was really honest and wanted to let you know up front what your net would be in the beginning, he would show you all those costs.
Yeah.
But very few agents do that. So let's take a look at this third column, because that's what I specialize in. I specialize in leases with options and land contract. And my number one job is to show you all the pluses and minuses to both of these. And if you like the third column better, then I'll get to work. It won't cost you anything. If you like the second column or the first column better, then I got to go. Sound fair?
Yep.
Okay. So, what have you ever heard of rent to own before, Robby? You know how it works?
Basically, just rent it out to somebody until they want to buy it.
Okay. Well, how does a rent to own arrangement help them get the mortgage?
Well, maybe if they got bad credit or something.
Right. If they needed more time on the job or more time in the area, it would show when they applied for the mortgage, they would be a stronger candidate, right? What if they went through a divorce, or what if they had an illness and they couldn't pay their bills for a while, and then they were back on their feet and they needed more time? This recession has hurt a lot of people. You know, a lot of people got into cash flow crunch and they can't get the mortgage right away, or if they're self-employed and they just needed 3 years tax returns and they need another year in the house. You see how it can help a lot of people? Now, I specialize in screening these people, right? We actually get them underwritten through an approved mortgage origination person. And there's new laws coming into effect where we have to actually do this really well, or the federal government won't allow these transactions. Okay? So we have a specialist. It's called an RMLO, and it stands for Registered Loan Mortgage Originator. And there's a new law coming into effect that these people need to screen these seller finance buyers. So what you're dealing with here are people that need a little bit of time, and then guess what? They're going to pay 100% for your house. They're going to give you your $150,000. And guess what else? Look over here on the first column here. Do you see where it says sales commission? There's no sales commission. So what I would write as I'm talking, I would write 150,000, 0 sales commission. Now, closing costs, we get the buyer to pay all the closing costs. So I would write at the bottom, closing costs, 0. The other thing that I like about this is there's no holding costs. The house doesn't have to be vacant. So you could be living in the house, show the house with all your furniture in it, and then people are walking through, and you could move out, and they could move in like a day later. So you're saving $3,600 for no holding costs, because we don't have to sell it when it's vacant. Okay? And lastly, whatever your PITI payment is the payment that these people pay. So if your payment is $1,200 a month, that's the payment that they're going to pay. Now, we do have to do it in 2 pieces. Let's say that market rent was $1,000. Well, what we'll do is we'll have $200 extra being applied toward the purchase price as a separate option payment. That helps them build up equity in the contract. Does that make sense?
Right.
But you're going to be getting $1,200 a month. So you don't have to feed this thing. And then what I would do is I would point to the left side. All right, so your choices here are sell it with an agent and pay the cost to sell and net less money. Or rent it out to an unproven tenant and deal with the risk that they don't pay you or some other issue. or sell it on terms. Now, assuming, let me just throw out a what if here, okay? And this is where you throw a what if into the 3 column, okay?
Okay.
What if we could find a young professional white-collar family to move into your house and make a payment to you that's your PITI payment for a period of time, and then pay you $150,000 for the house, where you would net more money than selling with an agent? Is that something that we could even talk about? Or maybe not? And what you want them to do, Robby, is to choose the 3rd column, right?
Sure. Right.
You want them to choose that 3rd column. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. I don't want to pay $25,000-$30,000 to sell with an agent, and I don't want to rent it out and deal with somebody that doesn't care about the house. And then they'll go through some objections. Well, what if the person that moves in tears up the house, or if the person doesn't pay me? Those kinds of objection handlers.
Sure.
But that's the basic 3 column method.
Okay.
Now, is that confusing to you with all the numbers and everything else?
No, that's actually a lot simpler than what I was doing. I was actually, when I got to last column, like going through kind of like the mechanics of it, which I'm sure I probably shouldn't do. So I was making it a little tougher on myself because what I've been trying to do is just record myself doing it. And, the more I do it, the better it gets. But
can you hold that up to the camera just for 3 or 4 seconds, what you've got there? A little higher. And pull it back a little bit. Right there. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, what I'd like you to do as your homework is to be able to kind of listen to this recording,
sure.
And then you do what I just did.
Okay.
What do you think?
No, I'm going to definitely get to practice in this because I feel that's going to be a good tool to have to be able to do it effectively. So,
well, if you need to get that piece down, and what we'll do is we'll have a letter of intent ready, right?
Okay.
Where it'll spell everything out, and we'll also have the SAFE Act in there, as far as letting them know that any prospective tenant buyer or land contract buyer will be properly investigated and underwritten by an RMLO as per the SAFE Act and the TILA and the Dodd-Frank law that's just coming into effect on January 10. These laws don't really come into effect until January 10,
right.
But we're gearing up so that we're all ready,
Sure, sure.
So I'll end this recording, and that's about the 3 column method, so that you can have this as a reference.